She was 84 years old. She lived alone. And sometime after 2 in the morning on February 1, 2026, she was gone. No forced entry reported. No struggle visible from the outside. No one screaming for help in the middle of the night in a quiet Tucson neighborhood. Just silence. And a front porch with blood on it that matched her DNA. And a pacemaker that stopped transmitting at exactly 2:28 in the morning and never started again. 42 days later, the FBI has recovered new surveillance images. A source says what they found inside that footage is odd. And Nancy Guthrie is still missing. This is not a cold case. This is not something that happened years ago and slipped through the cracks of a system too slow to respond. This happened weeks ago. The investigation is active. The DNA lab is still running. The genealogy team has been initiated. The FBI Most Wanted page was updated this week. And yet, 42 days in, there is no arrest. There is no named suspect. There is no explanation for why her Nest security system went dark at 1:47 in the morning before any of this began. And the only word anyone connected to this investigation has used to describe the newest footage is a single, deliberate, carefully chosen word. Odd. We're going to stay with that word today. We're going to pull it apart and examine what it means in the context of forensic investigation, what it tells us about the footage itself, and why investigators do not use language like that unless they mean something specific by it. But before we do any of that, you need to understand the full picture of what happened on the night of February 1, because every detail in this case is connected, and the connections matter. If this case has been sitting in the back of your mind the way it has been sitting in ours, subscribe to True Crimes J right now and hit that notification bell. We are covering every development in this story as it happens, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Like this video and drop a comment telling us what part of this investigation you think needs more attention. We read every single one. Now let us get into it. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the anchor of NBC's Today Show. But before she was anyone's mother, before she was attached to a name most of the country recognizes from morning television, she was a woman living her life in Tucson, Arizona. Living alone. Managing her health. Taking her medication every single day. A woman with a pacemaker keeping her heart in rhythm, a Nest camera watching her front door, and a life built around a routine that kept her stable and safe. On the night of February 1, 2026, that routine ended. Investigators arriving at her home found her medication still sitting on the counter exactly where she left it. Her car was inside the garage, untouched. Her wallet was still in the house. There was no indication she had packed anything, prepared anything, or decided to go anywhere on her own. The evidence did not point to a woman who left. It pointed to a woman who was taken. Blood was confirmed on the front porch. That blood was tested. It matched Nancy's DNA. Her pacemaker, a device implanted in her chest to keep her heart beating in its proper rhythm, stopped transmitting its signal at 2:28 in the morning. That timestamp is one of the most significant details in this entire case. Pacemakers transmit data continuously. They do not simply stop unless something has happened, either to the device, to the power source keeping it connected, or to the person carrying it. At 2:28 in the morning on February 1, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker went silent. And it has not transmitted since. Cadaver dogs were brought to the property and found no remains. Forensic expert Jim Clementi, a former FBI profiler with decades of experience reviewing cases exactly like this one, examined the available evidence and reached a conclusion that is both the most hopeful and the most urgent finding in this investigation. He stated that she left the house alive. Not that she walked out. Not that she left willingly. But that the evidence supports the conclusion that Nancy Guthrie was alive when she was removed from that property. That matters. It matters medically. It matters legally. And it matters for every day that follows, because it means time is not a neutral variable in this case. Time is the enemy. Now here is the suspect. Because there is a suspect. This was not a ghost. This was not a force of nature. This was a person, captured on surveillance footage, who entered Nancy Guthrie's home with equipment that tells its own story about planning and intent. He entered wearing a mask and gloves. He carried an Ozark Trail 25-liter backpack. He had a holster on his person. He carried a walkie-talkie. He wore a ring on his hand. And on his right wrist, visible in the surveillance footage the FBI has already published, there is a tattoo. A dark marking described as consistent with a sleeve-style design extending toward the forearm. Let that settle for a moment. The FBI has footage of this person. Not a sketch. Not a description from a neighbor trying to remember a face in the dark. Actual footage. With a visible tattoo on the right wrist. With a ring on his hand. With the backpack, the holster, and the walkie-talkie all visible and identifiable. This person has been seen. He has been recorded. He exists in that footage with enough physical detail that anyone who knows him, anyone who has been around him, worked near him, lived near him, seen him in a store or a neighborhood or a family gathering, would recognize that right wrist the moment they saw it. And yet no one has come forward to claim the more than $1.2 million reward. We will come back to that. But first, let us talk about the dry run. Because this was confirmed by ABC. Before the night of February 1st, the suspect visited the area. He was there before he acted. He came once to observe. To learn the layout. To understand the timing of the security systems, the rhythm of the neighborhood, the gaps in the surveillance window he would need to exploit. He studied this. He planned this. And then he came back to act on everything he had learned. This is not the behavior of someone who acted on impulse. This is not a crime of opportunity. The dry run alone tells investigators, and tells us, that whoever took Nancy Guthrie invested time and deliberate thought into exactly how and exactly when to do it. He knew her address. He knew her security setup. He knew when her Nest camera would be vulnerable. And he knew that by the time anyone realized she was gone, he would already have had hours to move. At 1:47 in the morning, Nancy's Nest security system disconnected. That timestamp is the beginning of the sequence. 1:47, the Nest goes dark. 2:28, the pacemaker stops transmitting. 2:36, a Ring camera 2.5 miles away captures movement. That is the timeline the FBI is working with. And it raises a question no one has officially answered. How did the Nest disconnect at 1:47? There has been no official explanation for that. Was it cut? Was it jammed? Was it disabled remotely by someone who knew exactly what they were doing with electronic surveillance systems? The Nest going dark before the suspect entered, before the pacemaker stopped, before any of the confirmed evidence begins, that sequence is not an accident. It is a step in a plan. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment right now with the words "I'm still here." Let us see who is truly following this case with us. And while you are down there, share this video, because the more people who see this footage description, the better the odds that the right person recognizes that tattoo. Every share matters. Every set of eyes matters. Now let us keep going. This week, Newsweek confirmed that the FBI has recovered new surveillance images in the Nancy Guthrie case. The agency is actively reviewing that footage as part of the ongoing investigation. And according to a source cited by Parade, investigators described what the footage contains as odd. That characterization has not been independently confirmed in full. But let us talk about what that word actually means in the context of forensic investigation, because it is not a throwaway description. Investigators do not use that word casually. They do not sit in a conference room reviewing surveillance footage and say something is odd because it made them vaguely uncomfortable. When a forensic professional describes evidence as odd, it means the footage does not match the prior assumptions they were working from. It means something in the image does not fit the model they have built of what happened and when. There are three situations where that word typically emerges in an active investigation. The first is when the suspect appears to be looking directly at the camera. Not glancing at it accidentally. Not briefly registering it and looking away. Actually looking at it. making deliberate eye contact with the lens in a way that suggests he knew exactly where it was and wanted to make sure he was centered in the frame or was checking his own visibility. That kind of camera awareness in a suspect suggests operational sophistication that most criminals simply do not possess. It suggests someone who has thought about surveillance systems, who understands how they work, and who was confident enough in his planning to interact with the camera on his own terms. The second situation is when a second individual appears in the footage. Someone who has not been previously identified. Someone who is not part of the established timeline and has not been accounted for in any of the publicly available evidence. A second person changes everything. It changes the nature of the crime, the scope of the investigation, and the direction of every lead the FBI has been following. A second person means this was not one man with a backpack and a plan. It means there is a network, however small, that has remained invisible for 42 days. The third situation is when the footage captures the period immediately before the crime from an angle investigators did not expect to have. Showing approach, positioning, preparation. Something that fills in the space between the nest going dark at 1:47 and the moment the suspect entered the home. If the new images cover that window, if they show what happened in those minutes before the pacemaker stopped, they could close the most significant gap in the reconstructed timeline of that night. Any one of those three scenarios reshapes what investigators are looking at. And the fact that the word being used by a source familiar with the footage is odd rather than significant or important or promising tells us something about the nature of what was found. Odd means unexpected. Odd means the footage created a question rather than answered one. Odd means the investigators reviewing it were surprised by what they saw, and surprise in a case this advanced is not always a sign of progress. Sometimes it is a sign that the case is more complicated than anyone publicly acknowledged. Now let us talk about the DNA. Because there are two separate scientific processes running simultaneously in this investigation, and both of them matter enormously for what comes next. The first is the DNA separation currently happening at a private laboratory in Florida. The gloves worn by the suspect were recovered and tested. The DNA found on those gloves is male. It is not in the national database, which means this person has no prior criminal record that included a DNA sample being collected and entered into the system. But the gloves contain mixed DNA, meaning more than one contributor is present in the sample. Before investigators can submit a clean profile to genealogical databases, they need to separate the suspect's DNA from any other contributors present on the gloves. That process takes time. It requires precision. And it is still ongoing. The second process is forensic investigative genetic genealogy. This is the same methodology that identified the Golden State Killer after decades of failure through conventional investigative methods. It does not require a name. It does not require a prior conviction or an existing database match. It requires a clean DNA profile. Once that profile is submitted to publicly available genealogical databases, the same databases people use to trace family ancestry and find distant relatives, investigators begin building a family tree outward from every match that emerges. Distant cousins. Second cousins. Third cousins twice removed. Every match narrows the field. Every family connection that can be traced brings investigators closer to identifying who this person is. The process takes time. It is not a switch that gets flipped. But it has broken cases that had been cold for 30 years. And it is running right now. When the lab finishes separating that DNA and a clean male profile is extracted from those gloves, what happens in the first 24 hours after that profile is submitted? That question has not been answered publicly. And that brings us to the part of this investigation that has generated its own serious questions entirely separate from the forensic evidence. According to NewsNation, an expert identified as Azari described serious errors in how the Pima County Sheriff's Department has led this investigation. The specific failures were not fully detailed in that report, and the account has not been independently confirmed across all its claims. But you do not need expert testimony to look at the public record and notice what is missing. The last official press conference held by the Pima County Sheriff's Department was on February 5. February 5. That is 37 days before this video was produced, 37 days without a single public update from the agency that is listed as the lead investigative body on this case. In 37 days, no press conference. No public statement. No update on where the investigation stands, what evidence is being processed, what leads are being followed, or what the public can do to help. 37 days of institutional silence from the agency responsible for finding an 84-year-old woman with a cardiac device who has been missing for 6 weeks. Volunteer search teams came to help. The Cajun Navy arrived. EquiSearch arrived. These are experienced, organized volunteer groups with track records in exactly this kind of search operation. They were turned away. No explanation was given publicly for why trained volunteer search resources were declined. Cadaver dogs were brought to the property, found no remains, and were subsequently removed. The DNA sample from the gloves was sent to a private lab in Florida rather than to the FBI laboratory, which has some of the most advanced forensic processing capability in the country. None of those decisions have been publicly explained. Sheriff Nenos is also navigating a separate civil lawsuit, a $1.3 million case reported by Cleveland.com, entirely unrelated to Nancy's disappearance but active while this investigation is running. How does an agency managing that level of external legal scrutiny simultaneously maintain the public trust that a case of this visibility demands? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the questions the Gurthrie family, the Tucson community, and anyone watching this case from the outside is entitled to have answered. Now consider the reward. More than $1.2 million. $1.2 million has been offered for information leading to Nancy Guthrie. That is not a token amount designed to make the family look cooperative. That is a number that would change the financial reality of most people's lives entirely. And 42 days into this investigation, not one credible tip has emerged that led to a claim. That fact alone tells us something about who this person is. There are two possible explanations. The first is that the people who might recognize the tattoo, the ring, the backpack, the walkie-talkie, the build, the gait, the face behind the mask, those people have not yet seen the footage or made the connection. They do not know what they know. The information has not reached the right set of eyes yet. The second explanation is darker. It is that the people around this suspect have seen the footage, have recognized something, and are choosing silence. Choosing it deliberately. Choosing it despite $1.2 million sitting unclaimed on the table. That level of silence suggests either extreme isolation or something that binds the people around this person more tightly than the reward can break. If that reward has not been claimed after 42 days, what does that tell us about the world this suspect moves through? Think about Nancy. Not about the investigation, not about the evidence, not about the forensic processes and the sheriff's department and the surveillance footage that may or may not be odd. Think about Nancy herself. She is 84 years old. Her medication was on the counter. Her cardiologist has not seen her in 42 days. Her pacemaker has not transmitted a signal since 2:28 in the morning on February 1st. For a woman her age, with her cardiac history, that medication is not a preference. It is not something she can go without for a few days and catch up on later. It is a daily requirement that regulates her heart and keeps her body functioning within a stable range. Every morning that medication sits in that bottle unclaimed is a morning her body is operating without the support it was built around. 7 weeks. 7 weeks without her medication. 7 weeks without her cardiologist. 7 weeks without the routine that has been keeping her alive. Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today anchor desk on March 5th. She sat in front of that camera. She looked into that lens. She did her job. And somewhere her mother is in a situation that no amount of professional composure can fully contain. The family is still searching. Every piece of evidence the lab touches is one thread being pulled. The new images. The gloves. The dry run. The tattoo. The ring. Each one connects to the same person. Each one is a thread that leads somewhere. And somewhere, that thread ends with a man who knows exactly what happened inside that house after 1:47 in the morning on February 1st. The FBI Most Wanted page for this case was updated this week with new details. That page is not updated casually. It is not refreshed on a schedule or maintained for appearances. It is updated when investigators believe that a specific piece of information, seen by the right person at exactly the right moment, could break the case open. The update this week signals that there is something new they want the public to engage with. The tattoo. The ring. The backpack. The walkie-talkie. The build. The footage. Somewhere, someone has seen all of those things in one place, on one person, and has not yet understood what they are looking at. Here is where this investigation stands today. The FBI has new surveillance images and a source says what was found is odd. The DNA from the suspect's gloves is being actively separated at a private lab in Florida. Serious errors in the investigation have been named publicly by a forensic expert. The last official press conference from the Pima County Sheriff's Department was 37 days ago. The reward stands above $1.2 million and it has not been claimed. The forensic genealogy process has been initiated and is running. And Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, dependent on daily medication, carrying a pacemaker that has been silent for 42 days, is still missing. Her medication sat on the counter. Her car never left the garage. Her wallet never left the house. The house has been silent for 42 days. Jim Clementi said she left that house alive. And somewhere, a man with a tattoo on his right wrist and a ring on his hand knows exactly where she went. Someone in Tucson saw something. Someone recognizes that wrist. Someone has been sitting with what they know, and they have not said it out loud yet. The images are odd. The DNA is being separated. The reward is unclaimed. 7 weeks. No arrest. No named suspect. No answer. Nancy Guthrie deserves more than a single word from a single source. She deserves to be found. If this video moved you, if this case has stayed with you, if you believe Nancy deserves justice and answers and to come home, then do something right now that costs you nothing. Subscribe to True Crimes J, hit the notification bell, and share this video with every person in your life. The next set of eyes that watches this footage description might be the ones that finally recognize that tattoo on that right wrist. Like this video so the algorithm puts it in front of more people. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of this investigation you think the Pima County Sheriff's Department owes the public an answer for. We read every comment. We will see you in the next video. Nancy is still out there. We are not moving on.